KR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, what thieves are interested in when it comes to your car? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. In the studio today is Tony Joe. He's here with me every Friday to take your Car Corner questions. The number to call is 1-877. Go ahead, do it, Tony Joe.
The number to call is 1-877-913-5357, and that is on the frequency side of the audio spectrum.
Okay, don't get into all that. Oh, boy.
I promised I wouldn't do it, so I had to do it. You know that.
1-877-913-5357. It's not as painful as it might seem like if you'd like to call in. But if you got a question and it has to do with your car and maybe a problem you can't get diagnosed, I've seen Tony Joe diagnose problems with cars for years. And if anything at all, maybe you can stump him.
Oh, that wouldn't be difficult.
You're being modest.
Yeah, but, you weren't around in the days when I was struggling to try to figure out what was wrong with the car for a week. That's hard-earned information.
1-877-913-5357. The inflation report came out today, and inflation, as far as they can tell, is kind of hanging on there. Went up a little bit. But I was just curious if you're seeing signs of inflation at your shop yet.
I am, actually, on parts. I'm seeing higher prices, and I can't attribute it directly to inflation or tariffs or whatever political involvement is causing the prices to go up. But yeah, I've noticed brake rotors, things like that, they're creeping up. And I could list a number of parts that have gone up, but I just happened to notice an increase within the last month, within the last 30 days. So yeah, whether it's due to inflation or not, I don't know, but prices are going up. And it seems like car prices, Bob, the average car price alone, $50,000.
Yeah,
that's the average.
Crazy.
So the parts are going to be expensive, and it just seems like it's becoming somewhat unreasonable to even own a car.
It was interesting. The one thing that people don't consider when they're about to buy a car is what it costs to fix it. And there is an
maintenance,
enormous difference between some brands of cars. In fact, I think I remember you even telling me the cars you would never even suspect are very, very expensive to fix after they get out of warranty. It really end up surprising consumers.
That's right. Generally speaking, I can say this blanket statement because it still holds true today. The more expensive or the more high-end vehicles are more expensive to maintain. Seems like the parts and the way you have to do it and go about it, so that means the labor's more. So the higher-end cars, the more expensive the vehicle, the more you can expect the maintenance costs, to be. That's just a general rule of thumb.
Yeah, I had a friend who had the Audi crossover, what it was, and had to get a brake job done. $4,500.
Yeah,
That's steep.
Yeah, that's expensive. Very expensive for a brake job.
1-877-913-5357. Do you have a line open? Chris just sent me a text and said it's expensive like the oil changes on your Ferrari.
Exactly.
Did you drive your Ferrari?
The oil changes on the Ferrari are getting to be pretty pricey now.
Do you know a good mechanic that can help you with that?
I do. I take it to a guy, and he changes the oil for me, and it's $400 every time. And I'm like, man, that can't be right.
really, I know this is going to shock everybody, but he does not own a Ferrari.
No, this is just something I'm making up in my head. I really don't own one.
1-877-913-5357. That is the number to call, and we do have a line open. You know, one of the things that you start to see as prices go up is shops switching from original parts to aftermarket parts. Is there really that big of a spread or that big of a difference between the two? And let me ask you this, to go along with that question. Are there different prices in the aftermarket sector?
There certainly is. Let me start by saying that the original equipment name brand parts from the manufacturer, such as you're working on a Toyota vehicle and you want all Toyota name brand parts. Now, it's kind of an interesting scenario, Bob, and I assume it's like this in other areas of commerce. I just suspect it's this way in a lot of industries. But you're paying for the name. If you buy a quart of oil and it's labeled a certain name brand that you're well aware of and everybody is heavily advertised on TV, you are paying for the name. So there is money involved in the higher price for the name brand product. What I get concerned with is as times get tougher and things get tighter, shops or dealerships or anybody will maybe use aftermarket parts. And when they do that, they are actually using not an original manufacturer's part, but the original manufacturer's part is going to cost X. They can buy the aftermarket part for 60% of that and charge you for the original part. So this is something that we need to watch carefully. And if you're getting your car serviced, you want to ask for specific questions like that. Are you going to use original manufactured parts? And if so, then I need to see, the billing and the proof. And, what did Reagan say? Trust but verify. Trust
right.
but verify. Not everybody's going to do that to you, but I will tell you in my opinion and in my experience, Bob, that I have seen a lot of information that's very inconclusive in the respect that I have used original parts from the manufacturer on a vehicle, and let's say, I'm just going to throw something out there, let's say the shock absorbers wore out at 80,000 miles and it needed new shocks. I could buy the original equipment shocks for X amount of dollars. However, there is companies that are strictly in the business of making shock absorbers and a few other items, but that's mainly what they do for a living. And they're name brands, and we've all heard of them, but the particular aftermarket brand of shock absorber is guaranteed for life. If anything ever happens to it, no matter where you are in the country, it can be removed and replaced at no cost because the shock will be reimbursed from the company. So it's warranted for life. The more expensive, let's say, Toyota shocks aren't necessarily that way. You can put them on there. They're going to cost more. They're going to be dealer item priced parts, and they're going to be original manufacturer. But that doesn't mean they're going to be better than the companies, a few select companies out there that I've been dealing with for years and years that I trust wholeheartedly. Sometimes you can get better aftermarket parts than the dealer. And that's not true in all cases, but in a lot of cases, it is true. And let me just make an analogy, Bob, if I could, with you. It's like when you buy a home, you're going to get generally builder's grade stove and appliances, stuff like that. It's not going to be top of the line stuff because they're trying to keep the price of the home at a reasonable level. So you can consider that to be kind of like some items on the car. I hate to say builder's grade because, original equipment is supposedly what you want on your car, but it's not always the case.
1-877-913-5357. So what's your policy as far as original parts versus aftermarket parts?
Well, I like to use aftermarket parts only in certain cases, and I explain this to the customer because I have also discovered, like in a lot of other areas of commerce, I'm sure, that the manufacturer of the aftermarket part, a name brand, also makes the same parts for the dealer, and they label it with the dealer name on it. So you see there's a certain number of brake manufacturers, yet they make the brakes for their own company, which is a name brand company. I don't want to say the name, but they also manufacture brake pads for Toyota, Nissan, and some of the other major manufacturers of automobiles. So when you do the research and you realize that, now that's not true in every case, and it could be a whole 3-hour discussion to explain all about how the industry works. But I can tell you that if you know the facts, because I'm always faced every day with this information, so I kind of know it just by being around. But when you find out there's a manufacturer that makes the same part for their own name brand, plus they make the brake pads for other car companies, why buy the name brand one from the company when you can buy this very well-known good name in aftermarket and you're getting the same product? They make them for some of the manufacturers of automobiles, some of the major manufacturers.
You know, that's interesting, and it makes me wonder what percentage of the mechanic community actually spends the time to stay on top of that and really get your client the best value.
Okay, I will tell you this. I will tell you how a lot of times it happens. We'll go on the other side of the break, and we'll talk about that.
1-877-913-5357. This is Bob Brooks. We'll be right back.
Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern-day steward movement.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson, host of Point of View. If you're trying to understand the world from a biblical perspective, you will want to join me on Monday and Friday from 1 to 3 p.m. on the Point of View radio talk show.
What exists in God's presence? Fullness of joy and pleasures forevermore. When we're with God, we're on the scene of endless explosions of absolute pleasure and joy. And that's what heaven will always be like.
Dr. David Jeremiah continues his series, The Promise of Heaven, next time on Turning Point.
9 a.m. here on 91.3 KDKR.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to this special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. 1-877-913-5357. You know, in doing radio with you for so many years, I don't think we've ever talked about this, and which just amazes me because it's at some point I'll look at you and think we've talked about just about everything you can think to talk about, but it's interesting to me that you could almost take original parts and divide them between premium original, or aftermarket original,
Mm-hmm.
and I would assume that they're all about the same quality.
Well, you can't. No, they're not all the same quality. This is where the rub is. What I was going to say before the break was, how do you accidentally stumble upon this information? You said if everybody would do the research, and nobody does. Well, I don't actually do the research. This is how it happens. And, of course, after 45 years of it happening like this, I've developed quite a bit of information regarding who makes what and what brand makes, certain things. Of course, they change, so I have to catch up sometimes. But let me just explain an example of how something like that happens to someone like me and probably a lot of other guys that are just like me in the business. You work on cars every single day. You see parts. You see different parts of different cars all the time. You wear out brake pads, and you have to order new pads. Now, you can get them from a variety of vendors, and some of them look like the original. Some of them look different than original equipment. You can pretty much kind of compare the construction and the thickness and kind of identify, kind of like a tailor would be able to identify a suit, a high-end suit, with somebody standing in an elevator. Well, that's an Armani suit. Well, how would I know that? I look at you and I go, I'm guessing it's Brooks Brothers. I don't know, but I don't. You know what I mean. He can look at a suit and he sees the details that the rest of us wouldn't possibly understand. So I remember one time working. I switched a battery in an automobile, and I noticed after years and years and years of doing this, I sold a certain brand name battery, and it was a popular battery. It was nationwide, and it was a very good name in the battery business. Well, I noticed other batteries from other auto stores that were aftermarket, not original from the dealer, but other batteries in the aftermarket world that when you take it out of the car, Bob, you notice the construction and the frame of the battery and the box and everything about the battery, the caps and everything, they look identical to the one. Not all of them, but once in a while I'd grab a battery and I'd say, that looks just like the brand I sell, but it's got a different name on it. And you get into a little bit of research and you find out that Johnson Labs makes that battery for a whole bunch of different vendors, okay? Mm-hmm. So it's all coming from the same company. And that's how you kind of accidentally stumble upon who makes what product and how many other names is it sold under. Bob, we've talked about this with tires.
But don't you have salespeople coming in to the shop to show you new parts and maybe to reinforce, hey, don't forget we've got the shock absorber that's as good as the original part. You don't have that?
Well, no. When they see the shotgun, they usually run away. So
the shotgun.
Actually, we don't have a lot of sales anymore, Bob. Really, they don't. It used to be that way, but we don't have a lot of sales reps anymore walking in and out like they used to.
Yeah, that's interesting. I thought you would be bombarded by them. We
used to be, but the way the business is now, especially the parts business, it's not as. I don't believe it's as lucrative as it once was, and we don't get a lot of that.
Chris says you need the parts shotgun. That's a new thing. 1-877-913-5357. I do have a line open. We'd love to hear from you today if you've got a question for Tony Joe. 1-877-913-5357. You know, I had an interesting email come in today, and the listener was talking about he feels like a fraud has been committed, and he was wondering what to do. Basically, and I don't know how I never got a return email, but I don't know how he found this out, but he said that the mechanic, instead of using original parts, which I guess is what he requested, he used aftermarket parts, and he discovered it, which I don't know how he discovered that, but he said he discovered it. What steps should he take at this point? Because he doesn't really know what to do.
Did he take his vehicle for repairs at a dealership or an independent?
I don't know.
Okay.
I never got a reply.
Well, I don't know that there's a whole lot he can do. However, I will paint a scenario that I would consider fraud, and that would be if he took it to a dealership and asked for original equipment parts, which whatever name brand manufacturer of the car, that's what you would want for the parts, like we discussed earlier in the program. But if they used aftermarket parts instead, and he found that out, he should go back and look at the price on the aftermarket parts and the original equipment parts. And if he was given aftermarket parts but paid the higher price for the OE parts, then yeah, that would be fraud. But just using aftermarket parts, not necessarily fraudulent. That I'm trying to think real quick. I don't think that's fraud. I don't think that would be in any way fraud if the prices reflected reasonable prices for the aftermarket parts. I can't see that as being fraud because the labor would be the same regardless.
And what kind of difference are you looking at, let's say on a shock absorber, when it's original?
Sometimes it can be half the price.
Half the And are you getting that much more quality?
No, well, sometimes it can be half the price if you compare it to the original equipment dealership price, okay? Now, yes, you're getting a good quality part because they're guaranteed for life, the particular one I'm thinking of. So they're not going to guarantee it for life if they don't believe in their product, and I have seen it for 30 years and used them, and yeah, they're really good stuff. But you can save a considerable amount of money in the aftermarket world if you know what you're doing. Now, when you just get online and order something from China, and it's $100 from the dealer and it's $25 from China, then you got to kind of suspect there's a quality difference there. Okay,
right.
The markup on the part for being original equipment isn't that much. You're getting a cheaper quality knockoff part.
Yeah, I guess I find it interesting that a company can put a lifetime warranty on something, price it reasonable, and yet you get great quality out of it. And I guess there's really there's a lot. I guess with your aftermarket parts, there's a lot of companies that sidestep some things and kind of cut corners.
Right. And remember, this is not in every case. This is not every case. This is only a few select cases that I have encountered in the years and years. So there's not a lot of them. There's a few of them.
So what most people don't know, because if you're just hearing about Prudent Money, you might know that we switched over to the 4:30 slot. We've been at the 3 o'clock slot for a very long time. And now we're grateful and feel really blessed to be here at 4:30 with you guys. So you might not know this, but Tony Joe is an amateur meteorologist. And I will go back to the famous story of when you said it was going to snow next week, and everybody else was saying, no, there's no way. And you said there was, and you explained why. Very impressive. So what do you think about this storm that's rolling in tonight?
Well, I think it's just going to be rain. I don't see it as being a really big, widespread event with tornadoes and severe weather. You know, it's going to be some thunderstorms and lightning. By the way, did you hear the storms last night?
Yeah.
That thunder was mad. Anyway, it's not going to be as bad as people think. Flooding rains, yeah, there will be areas that get a couple of inches of rain in a short period of time, but most of us won't. And so you can mark my words on that.
Oh, okay, great, yeah. I'll make a prediction. Hey, it's going to rain tonight.
As they say in the NBA, you can bet on that.
That was good.
It just came to me, you know, sometimes things just click.
Yeah, no, I'm a victim of that. And it's not good. It's just horrible. So we have a little bit less than a minute left. What to give some practical advice as far as driving up on some on what you think is very shallow water but could be a real problem?
Yeah, you know, if we do get rain, especially at night, the thing you got to remember, especially, you know, we like to pride ourselves in addressing young people starting off with their cars, new drivers, stuff like that. So, you know, if you're driving at night and it's raining heavily, you think, well, big deal, it's raining. Well, it is a big deal, especially if it's raining really hard, because the water can build up on low spots on the road, and you can go through it not knowing a few things about your car, like where is the air intake drawn from? Under the bumper, if it's a turbocharged car, you're going to get air in the engine, you're going to get water in the engine, and you're going to ruin the engine just by driving through too deep of water. So there's things we need to talk about sometime, Bob, about certain areas of water and so forth that people need to learn not to do this, and not just don't do it, but why don't you do it?
You know, something else too, real quick, is that there are places in Dallas that flood.
Yes, there is.
People just don't think of that.
That's right, there is.
This is Bob Brooks. If you have a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. So we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a